Hey, more my friendly hello, welcome to lovely Las Vegas for Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Hoops Peterson, now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. We've got an excellent podcast for you as we're going to be joined in segment number 2 by one of our good friends, Blake Lovell, who does such amazing work over at Southeastern 16. We're going to be chatting with him about the landscape of the SEC. We're going to be taking a look at the 2 SEC games that we've got here on Tuesday, the rise that we've been seeing out of Florida, and he does a great job in terms of covering the entire landscape of college basketball. So a few teams are standing out to him that he's got his eye on as well. In the final segment, going to get you guys picks and analysis on every game on the betting board for this college basketball Tuesday as we hit some make shots. If you have a question, comment, segment idea, what have you for this podcast, you have one or two ways we'll fire those in. First one is my Twitter/X timeline at GUNet_81. Keep in mind, RCM, name does not matter, so as per usual, please do send these into the timeline. The other way is find an Apple Podcast review. If you rate this podcast 5 stars, it is very much appreciated. From there, you're able to fire in whatever you like to hear on this podcast via that 5-star review. While I did not get in any Twitter/X questions today, we had a fun day of college basketball on Monday. Let's take a look back at it, try to find some trends, and try to get to know these teams a little bit better.
Games from yesterday is Greg buzzing about. Here is the rowdy recap.
Kansas now 40-0 on Big Monday under Bill Self. They were down Darren Peterson. Does not matter. Arizona takes their first loss of the season, which means Miami of Ohio, your last undefeated team, 82-78 the final. And for Arizona, they win the rebound battle 45-41. They do lose the turnover battle 13-11, but here's the difference in the game. Kansas 21-25 at the free throw line. Arizona 8-14 at the charity stripe. Melvin Council, Flory Badunga both had 23 points apiece. Flory had himself 10 rebounds, 3 blocks. As for Kansas, they had 8 total block shots in this game. Braden Burries was able to supply 25 points for Arizona, but not enough on this day as Kansas, they're able to pull it out. St. John's, they do get the outright win, but if you, like me, had the under, this game goes to overtime, and they don't call it undertime, but St. John's 87-82 winners over Xavier. Xavier just 5 of 17 from three-point range, and both of these teams were rough at the free throw line. For Xavier, 9 of 17 at the charity stripe, 28 out of 41 for St. John's, but St. John's does win the rebound battle 48-40. They actually lose the turnover battle 10-9, but Zuby had for 25 big points in this one. Dylan Mitchell was able to supply 12 rebounds, and Dylan Darling off the bench, 16 points. So St. John's, they do stave off that upset. For NC State, we're going to hear Blake Lovell talk about them a little bit more. We did this before the game. They get buried by Louisville, 118-77 the final, and for Louisville, 18 out of 30 from three-point range. Miguel Brown, who had been shooting like 30% from three-point range for the year, that percentage went up. He had 45 points on 10 of 16 three-point shooting. Ryan Conwell had 31. Between the two of them, they had 76 points. NC State had 77 as a collective, and NC State 4 of 22 from the floor. Louisville wins the rebound battle 42-28. They actually play even up in terms of turnover battle 10-10, but Louisville, big giant winners out there. So you saw some ranked action, and you saw a lot of MEAC, some SWAC, some Southland, and Stone Cold Stephen F. Austin, who I have been loving this year. They enter in the day your top cover team in all of college basketball, and they still are, but they go from 18-4 against the spread to 18-5 against the spread. Win but no cover against East Texas A&M, 74-70 the final. As East Texas A&M 9-25 from 3. Now East Texas A&M loses a turnover battle 14-10. They lose the rebound battle 36-25, but a little bit of cold shooting here from Stephen F. Austin, and East Texas A&M actually shoots 54% from the floor. So there we get a nice quality cover out there. In terms of the other teams out there in the Southland, you saw UT Rio Grande Valley absolutely take it to Nichols, and for Grand Valley now 13-10 against the spread. They've been able to cover a few numbers. They get this one in very convincing fashion by kind of 92-72, and they've been an amazing three-point shooting team away from home, 9-21 from the outside, and Nichols just 12 of 22 at the free throw line, so that was a big one. Incarnate Word, they've been a little bit rough against the spread thus far this season. They have gone just 8-14 against the spread. Speaking of these Southland teams, and for Incarnate Word on Monday, they do fall to Southeast Louisiana by kind of 74-62. Not a great performance from them, as they allow a Southeast Louisiana team that has been awful with their shooting to be able to win the turnover battle 11-7, had to go 8-24 from three-point range. So another non-cover out of the old Word. For the SWAC, we saw quite a few of their teams in action on Monday. Your surprising top cover team in the SWAC is right now Alcorn State, who's not a very good team. I'm calling it what it is, but 13-9-1 against the spread. They were able to lambaste Mississippi Valley State 74-66 the final. They get the cover in this one as they go 10-24 from 3-point. Actually lose a rebound battle 36-23, but won the turnover battle 11-4 as well. And Shane Lancaster, their top scorer, was able to supply 15 points, top scorer for the season. So he was able to help out. Texas Southern has actually been your worst cover team in all of college basketball for a bunch of the season. 5-15 against the spread. They go to overtime against Bethune-Cookman, and for Texas Southern, they were catching quite a few points in this game, and they managed to not cover. This was a spread of about 6.5 to 7 points. They lose 79-69 in overtime. They are reinventing ways to not cover this game as Troy Hupstead, 10 points, 15 rebounds, and for Bethune-Cookman, they go 23 out of 35 at the free throw line, but they win the rebound battle 47-37, so yeah, that was another rough one for them. And Southern has been a bad cover team as well. 8-13 against the spread. They get the win, but they get no cover against Alabama State. This by kind of 69-68 as for Southern. 19 out of 25 at the free throw line, just 15 out of 23 for Alabama State. That ended up being the difference in terms of the straight-up result, but Alabama State, for some reason, they're shooting much better from 3-point range away from home rather than at home. They go 9 of 22 from 3-point range. In terms of the MEAC side of things, you've had Howard go 13-7-1 against the spread this season. A rare non-conference game against Yale on Monday, and they hold in there. They don't get the win, but they get the cover 87-81. This game went to overtime. This game was 71-71 at the end of regulation. So if you had the under in this one, I really feel bad for you. But Howard is able to go 10 of 22 from 3-point. They actually win the turnover battle 15-11, but got lambasted on the glass 43-28. As for Yale, you had Trevor Mullen, who's been a little bit more of an ancillary guy for the team, supplied 23 points, and Samson Altanen was able to supply 14 rebounds as well. Common State has not been a good cover team. They are 9-15 against the spread. They've been rough out there in the MEAC, but a team that has been almost as rough, 7-11 against the spread, Delaware State, and Delaware State has been an almighty team to the under. How about 4 overs and 14 unders? That is second worst in terms of the over rate in college basketball. 72-63. They fall to NC Central. They had control of this game early. They let go of the rope. This was a closing total in a lot of places of 134.5. So you're just barely able to get the over. Delaware State 4 of 16 from 3-point range. NC Central only 3 of 9 for 3, and NC Central has been playing their fair share of unders as far this season as well, but certainly some less than savory results out there. Another good under team was in action on Monday. That would be Southern Illinois. We saw a lot of Missouri Valley Conference action, and if you took the opening 144.5, you got the over. Closed more around 146.5 or so, so the closing number goes under 80-65. Southern Illinois absolutely takes it to Indiana State. Indiana State 7-25 from 3-point range. They lose the rebound battle 43-34. They lose the turnover battle 17-12. So Southern Illinois, they're able to go out there. They're able to dominate this game. So yay, verily for them. And if you're looking at your top over teams in all of college basketball, you didn't see too many of them on Monday. It was a lot more under teams because we've been finding that more in the MEAC and the SWAC. Your top MEAC over team compensated at 16 overs and 8 unders. We did not see them in action on Monday. So a little bit bereft of that. But Drake is now 15 overs to 9 unders as they lose to Valparaiso by a count of 81-76, and this is a Valparaiso team that's not shot it well all season long, but they went 9-22 from 3-point range in this game. Valparaiso, they win their rebound battle 42-34. They lose the turnover battle 11-6, and Jalen Quinn did his best for Drake. He went for 33 points, but for Drake, 7 of 27 from 3-point range, so that was a bit of a rough one for them as well. And with that cover, Valparaiso now 15-8-1 against the spread. By the way, Indiana State getting back to them 13-9-1 against the spread. Your worst cover team in the Missouri Valley has actually been Bradley at 9-16 against the spread, but they got the job done against Belmont on Monday, 95-84 in overtime. This game was tied at the end of regulation, 80-80, and then Bradley pulls away from there as they go 17 of 36 from 3-point range. For Belmont, they've had a tough time taking care of the ball all season long, 17-8. They lose the turnover battle in this one, and Jaquan Johnson, how about the night that he had 3 steals, 7 assists, 4 rebounds, 31 points for Bradley. So even though they have not been covering a lot of numbers this year, they find a way to pull that one out. And Drake, by the way, getting back to them, 9-15 30-15 against the spread as well. Northern Iowa has also been a really good under team for you as well, though they did play a rare over. They're now 7 overs to just 16 unders thus far this season. They absolutely take it to Murray State. This by a count of 89-60 as Murray State, they lose by 29 points on their own floor as they go 5 of 25 from three-point range. 38-25 Northern Iowa wins the rebound battle, and for Northern Iowa, they win the turnover battle 9-6 as well. So they were able to do a nice job just handing out some good, clean domination out there. And then in terms of a few other games that were of intrigue, we did see Central Arkansas in action, and Central Arkansas has been one of your better cover teams. This was a closing number that in a lot of places where it's more around that 6.5 range, it was 7 to 7.5 to start off with, 72-65. They do get the job done there, and all of a sudden for Central Arkansas, they're against the spread this season, a nice hearty 13-8-2. So they've been able to make it quite a bit of money out there. And then UNC Wilmington, they've been an intriguing team out there in a Coastal Conference that has been just very, very janky to say the least. But for Wilmington, even though they've been really one of your top teams in the conference, just 9-11-2 against the spread, but they do persevere on this night against Charleston. This by a count of 76-64 as Charleston has been a rough three-point shooting team, 5-19 from three-point range. Meanwhile, for the Seahawks, they go 8-24 from the outside. UNC Wilmington wins the turnover battle 13-5. They win the rebound battle 39-37. So they do find a way to manage, get the job done out there, and are actually now 13 overs to 9 unders as far this season, even though they've been a pretty strong defensive team. And then you saw a Big Ten matchup between Indiana and Oregon. Oregon now 7-17 against the spread. Not great as they get lambasted by Indiana. 92-74 the final. This was a normal first half. Indiana was up 36-30, and then they outscore Oregon in the second half, 56-44. Just nothing going right for Oregon this year. They do have Nate Biddle back in the fold. Nate Biddle was able to give the team 15 points, 8 boards, 6 assists, so he did all that he could. But for Indiana, 11-27 from 3 as Lamar Wilkerson, 41 big points in this one. And if you're taking a look at trend-wise, what we're all getting in college basketball right now, it has been all about unders and underdogs thus far this season, as the underrate in college basketball is right around about 51%, 2,112 unders, 2,028 overs. Meanwhile, the underdogs sitting at 51.2%, 2,121 and 2,018 against the spread. And if you look at the last 7 days in college basketball, the unders are hitting at about 55.5%, 187 unders to 151 overs. Meanwhile, the underdogs hitting more around about 52.5%, 177 and 161 against the spread. So that's where we're seeing college basketball right now, and that's where we're all getting trend-wise. Coming next, how about if we do chat it up with one of our good friends and Blake Lovell and take a look at the SEC and so much more with him right here on Just Get Seats with myself, Grady Peterson, now a part of the Beast and Family Podcast. Side edge this college basketball season? Well, VSiN experts use CBB Analytics, the most comprehensive college basketball analytics platform in the world. See injury impact, on and off data, clutch time performance metrics, first versus second half splits, and so much more. Utilize the promo code of VSiN, that is VSIN, to get $30 off and find your betting edge over at cbbanalytics.com. That is cbbanalytics, all one word.com. For anyone that is new to VSiN, well, I wish you a friendly hello. This is an attention to anyone that is new to VSiN because you're able to get some free stuff with our daily newsletter. It's a great way to catch up on everything that's happening in the sports betting world. It's delivered straight to your inbox every single morning. VSiN's newsletter offers picks, data, strategies for the day's betting menu, and so much more. Sign up for free today over at VSiN.com/newsletter. That's VSIN.com/newsletter, and start receiving your free newsletter tomorrow morning. That is VSIN.com/newsletter. Stay ahead of the game and bet smarter with VSiN. And we're back here, lovely Las Vegas, for Just Get Seats with myself, Greg Peterson, now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. Always great to be joined by this man, as we've got Blake Lovell aboard. He does such amazing work over at Southeastern 16, looking at this great game that we all know and love of college basketball. I know that he is hard at work taking a look at a little bit of everything. Obviously, the SEC is his main beat, but there's a lot going on in this great sport. He does a great job of being able to decipher it all. You're able to follow him on the old Twitter/X at the Blake Lovell. Last name is spelled Lovell. And Blake, it's always a pleasure, my friend. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks always for having me, Greg.
Blake, it has been an exciting first month or so in the SEC, and just how are you taking a look at this conference right now? A conference where Texas A&M is finding themselves on top. They take that massive loss to Florida, though, and I think over the weekend we saw perhaps a little bit of a changing of the guard in the SEC, where Florida feels like it's played the best basketball of anyone over the last 2 or 3 weeks.
Yeah, I think so. And I think, it's kind of early on in SEC play. It was really trying to figure out how you sort of define what these teams could be. And, unusually Florida starts 5-4. There have been stretches for pretty much every other team, really up until Texas A&M this past week. Everyone kind of had what we would call some of those games that just didn't look great and didn't play well. And you just kind of chalked it up to that's sort of the SEC this season. And but now I think you're definitely seeing Florida start to separate themselves a little bit. I know they lost that Auburn game a little ways back, but really I just think they're playing at a different level than pretty much every other team at this point. But, you've also got teams like Kentucky, who I think have really started to turn it on. And for some reason, you can look at kind of some of the close games and having to make comebacks and all this other stuff. But at the same time, they're winning games. And that's really what it comes down to is they just keep finding ways to win, outside of, again, laying an egg at Vanderbilt, but who hasn't had one of those games really at this point. So it's kind of looking at the landscape and seeing, okay, it's Florida, it feels like, at the top, and then it's trying to figure out that mix of teams, whether it's Kentucky, Arkansas, Tennessee, Alabama. I think Vanderbilt slipped a little bit just because of the injury situation there. It's going to be a lot of fun, I think, to see how this unfolds over the next several weeks.
Oh, no question about it. Maybe we don't have that bona fide top 5 team right now in the SEC, but boy, oh boy, do we have a bunch of tightly knit teams, as Blake Lovell, who does such great work over at Southeastern 16, is joining me on Coast to Coast Hoops. And we talked about the top teams there. How do you take a look at the middle of the conference right now? Because we do have teams like Georgia. Oklahoma, it looked like, was really fading out of the conference. They go out there and they absolutely dominate the early part of that game against Vanderbilt and then hold on for dear life. We've got a Texas team that I think is very interesting as well. Alabama has been up, down, all around. You talk about Auburn. I think that the middle of the conference is so intriguing because, for lack of a better term, it just feels like a bunch of very bubblicious teams right now without a lot separating them.
Yeah, and I think, this year too in the SEC, we've talked about it. If you're looking at teams like Texas and Auburn, and even, Alabama's kind of been a mixed bag at times. The one thing those teams have in common is that they're all great offensive teams, but also the thing they have in common is that they're not really elite defensive teams. And I think that has just allowed so many more of kind of these swings in games. We've talked about this a lot this season, but, a team like LSU is more towards the bottom. Look how many just roller coaster type 10-minute stretches they've had. But you can kind of say that about quite a few other teams, maybe not to the extreme that LSU's had them, where they get down, 27 or 28 in the first half. Even the game against Georgia the other night, you look up and they're up 15. And then it's like they're down by 10. That's just the way it's gone for them. But I think some of these other teams, have some of these stretches. The Auburn Texas A&M or the Texas game, I thought, was a great example of that, where you're looking at two teams who are so good offensively that you never feel like, you're going to be able to just completely put them away. I think Texas was up 14 in the first half. Auburn winds up winning that game, comes back, scores a ton of points. And so I think especially those teams like that are in the middle of the pack, who can really, score the ball and may give up some points, they're at least finding a way to, again, beat teams that can beat some of these top teams that are sitting there in the standings right now. I think Alabama's probably got the best chance of the group to go on a run here just because of their upcoming schedule. They've got a lot of very winnable games, and I know the Charles Bediako thing is in now. Seems like he won't be playing, but I still think Alabama's schedule sets up pretty nicely. And so from that standpoint, we're going to see if these teams that are just, really, really good offensively can keep working their magic, and just hope that you don't run into a stretch where you can't score, because if that's the case, some of these teams at times just aren't good enough to make up for it on the defensive end. And so we'll see kind of how it unfolds for them.
No question about it. And I do have to throw this in here as well. Mike, the Charles Bediako situation would be a top 5 strange situation that we've seen in this decade in college basketball, because he was out there for like 3 or 4 games. Now he's out. I kept on making the joke. If you've ever seen the movie The Benchwarmers, it's like where the guy pays $10 and writes on crayon, "I'm 12. That's what it felt like with Charles Bediako. And I almost have a little bit of a fear that might actually hurt Alabama and their chemistry moving forward.
Yeah, and it's going to be interesting to see. And I think at least when you look at the short term, again, I think the schedule, they're at Ole Miss on Wednesday. They host South Carolina. Then they get a home game against Arkansas, at LSU, home against Mississippi State. That's probably about as good of a 5-game stretch as you could ask for in terms of having the games at home you need at home, which is really the Arkansas game. and I think very winnable road games. And so, we're going to see if that affects them in games like that. I feel like matchup-wise, none of those teams feel like the kind of teams that are going to really pressure Alabama in terms of like the Bediako factor. But then you look at their last 3 games of the season. They're at Tennessee, they're at Georgia, they're home against Auburn. I think those are all games that you could see not having someone like that really factor in. And so it's going to be interesting because, like you said, the chemistry-wise, I mean, here's a guy who came in and played 5 games. They went 3-2 in those games. No question he played a factor, especially look at the role he played in the Auburn game and so forth. So I'm curious to see what Alabama looks like. The strength of this team is still their guard play, but he was a valuable piece of the puzzle here, just, in looking at kind of the impact he made in some of these past, several games. So we'll see again, if Alabama's going to make a run back to the Final Four or something, it's going to probably look somewhat similar to the one they made last time. And that is a team that just got hot offensively, maybe still, did not quite have the crispness on defense that they needed, but they may just score enough points that it doesn't matter.
It's just insane what we see out of these Alabama games, as we saw it on display against Auburn over the weekend as well. So, yep, it's certainly going to be a very, very fun team to watch, to say the least. Maybe they're not going to be able to make as deep of a run in the NCAA tournament as they did a season ago, but no question about it. We've got some intrigue there, and we've got some intrigue that is going to be going down on Tuesday as well with that Vanderbilt versus Auburn game, because Auburn, they're coming off of that bad loss to Alabama that we just talked about, and for Vanderbilt, yes, they're still 6-4 in SEC play, but I believe they've now lost 4 out of their last 6 games as well. How do you take a look at this one with an Auburn team that's been great on offense and, as you alluded to, not so great on defense, and Vanderbilt legitimately has been relatively solid on defense, but it feels like without Frankie Collins, they just haven't been the same team.
Yeah, Vanderbilt's not the same team right now as obviously the one that started 16-0. It's probably unreasonable to expect them to be that, just given the injury situation. I mean, think about this too. Frankie Collins, we talked about it, is their best perimeter defender. He's been out for a while, and that has, hurt them in some games and maybe not been as impactful in others. But the Duke Miles thing to me is the one where, if you think about the conversation we're having about this guy in late December, I said at the time, he is a first-team All-SEC player right now, and you could put 2 Vanderbilt players on there with him and Tyler Tanner, and I wouldn't bat an eye because that's how good he had been playing to that point. But now, he missed a couple games there in December and January. Now he's not played in the last 3 games. And when he comes back, we don't know exactly. We don't know the time frame. And I think that is what's really hurting this team, is just that combination of not having both of those guys. Whereas, maybe you get by a little bit if you have one or the other, but not having both, that is putting so much pressure on them to play a different way. And the problem is with this Auburn matchup, you're down 2 key players potentially. And you're also playing a team that gets people in foul trouble as good as anybody out there. It's already a Vanderbilt team that fouls a bit. And so you're down 2 key rotation guys. I mean, 2 starters, basically, in terms of the production they bring to the table. And now you've got to go play a team that's going to get you and your big guys in foul trouble probably 99.9% of the time. So I just think it's a problematic matchup for Vanderbilt, and they might lose this one again. And again, if you look at the upcoming schedule after that, they play Missouri and they play Texas A&M. A&M, what's A&M going to do? They're going to pressure them, and they may have only one ball handler with Tyler Tanner. And so it's just one of those where you probably couldn't have asked. I mentioned Alabama's schedule. Probably couldn't ask for a worse schedule for Vanderbilt based on your limitations right now without some key players. Unfortunately, I think this skid may continue a little bit for them.
Yep, I think so, as well as Blake Lovell, who does such great work over at Southeastern 16, is joining me right here on Coast to Coast Hoops. And then there's a question of what are we going to be able to get out of LSU, as they're playing an Arkansas team that recognized that about a week or so ago. They took that less than savory loss at home against Kentucky, the John Calipari Bowl 2.0. But that said, they bounced back over the weekend, absolutely lambasted a Mississippi State team that they are right now looking like one of the worst teams in the SEC. That has been not great, to say the least. But I mean, this is a game where LSU, it feels like they've honestly played better than their 2-8 record would indicate in conference play. It feels like they've been in most of these games. They just have not been able to pull them out, especially that Kentucky game where they had the big giant run. They fall just 1 point short on the road. They lose to Texas A&M by 3. I think that things are going to be going a little bit better, and ever since then, it's been a little bit up and down. What do you make out of this game? Because it's a rematch of a game that we saw a few weeks ago where Arkansas won the game, but that was a 4-point game.
Yeah, and that's why I think it's so hard to project LSU games right now, because you don't feel like they're just a truly bad team overall. And remember, Dean Thomas has been in and out of the lineup a bit, and that's hurt them too. I mean, he's their best player. He missed 5 games in a row there, came back for 3, now's missed the last 2. You think again, like chemistry wise, that's not been great just because, he is such a key part of this thing for them, and he would have been on the all SEC radar had he not missed so many games at this point. That's been kind of an unfortunate break for LSU. And like I mentioned earlier, I mean, this is a team this season, if you really think about it, they've gotten down by 28 at home to South Carolina, who probably most people would say is the worst team in the SEC right this second. They have gotten down by 27 at home to Mississippi State. Like, these are in the first half. Like, and it's just like, how does that even happen? But yet, it's also, as you said, the same team who went to Arkansas and lost by 4 and has been pretty competitive, lose at the buzzer to Kentucky, was competitive at Vanderbilt, lost by 3 at A&M. And I'm just like, I don't know who they are. Like, it's so tough. And I'm sure that's the same thing Matt McMahon's thinking right now, is that you just don't have a great grasp, throughout a 40-minute game, what you're going to get from possession to the next possession. And so, Arkansas has a pretty, I think, sizable advantage here, but you just never know with LSU. They just play too many games that are very chaotic. And could you see them coming out and hitting a bunch of threes here maybe and beating Arkansas? Of course, but I could also see Arkansas doing the same thing and just, running out and winning by 25.
Yeah, but it's going to be a fun one to take a look at, to say the least. And there's just a lot of intrigue in general in the conference right now. Those are the 2 games that we're going to be seeing on Tuesday. And then on Wednesday, we have ourselves a big one, the old Florida-Georgia line for all of you country music fans. And we talked about Florida, them ascending, perhaps being the top team in the SEC right now. But Georgia, they've been a team that has just been so interesting to watch because we both have been stunned by the way that they have just absolutely gunned it thus far this season. It felt like things were really starting to hit the skids for them a little bit. They lose that absolutely crazy game against Tennessee. They lose 3 straight, but order was restored against, ironically enough, the team that we were just talking about, LSU. And I think that this is going to be a big game for a Georgia team that last time they played Florida, they got punked in the second half and lost that game 92-77.
Yeah, they did. And also, speaking of wild swings, let's not forget also the last time they played in Athens last year, Florida was just on a roll, and Georgia was up 26 in the first half against them. And this was a Georgia team, remember, that finished 6-12 in the SEC. So Florida wants to forget about that one. And you said it. I mean, Georgia, I thought was just going along just fine, had no worries about the NCAA tournament and all that. Now it's gotten a little bit more, I think, dicey for them. They lost the 3 in a row. They did get the comeback win at LSU, but they still, I think, got to win some games here down the stretch to feel comfortable about getting in. And this would be a significant one. There's no question when you look at, the potential of what this could mean to win a game against Florida. And we know kind of what it meant for Georgia last year around this time. I think, as always, Greg, that the problem is, how do you stop Florida on the offensive glass? Georgia's been the worst team in the SEC so far in giving up, a just gazillion offensive rebounds, 41.9%. That is just an absurd number when you think about what teams are doing to them on the offensive glass. I mean, we saw what Tennessee did to them and so forth. And I just think that's the problem. Tennessee had 26 offensive rebounds against them. And so I worry about that in this matchup. If you go back the last time around, Florida had 22 of those. If you give up that many second chance opportunities and you find yourself in a big deficit here, let's also remember that Georgia's not a great shooting team. And so I just think that, again, matchup-wise, this feels like one that sets up pretty well for Florida. But, you can't discount either the idea that Florida's coming off playing a big road game, battle for first place, and then they've also got Kentucky coming up on Saturday. So could you have a little bit of a, game that gets overlooked here by the Gators? Potentially. But I think a lot of things have to go right for Georgia here to win this one.
Yeah, with Georgia, they're going to need to generate some turnovers. They've been very strong with that regard, but I've been watching the downfall of this rebounding, and man, the number that you just laid out, how you allow teams to grab over 41% of their businesses in offensive rebound, man. Like, that's reserved for the teams like North Florida, the teams that go bombs away from three-point range. So, not great to say the least, as Blake Lovell, who does such great work over at Southeastern 16, is joining me on Coast to Coast Hoops. And Blake, obviously you do such great work covering the SEC, but I know that you're a man that really covers this entire sport also well. So, I always love to ask you this. Who's a team outside the SEC that you're looking at right now and you're just feeling good about them heading into early February, and you feel like perhaps they've turned a corner and might be able to be a little bit more of a threat in the national landscape?
I've talked about this team a lot. I feel like at various points, Greg, either in the preseason or now where they're at this point. But, I mean, NC State right now, the Fighting Will Wades, I mean, you're thinking about where they're sitting after losing at home to a not great Georgia Tech team. And I'm just sitting there like, how did they get here? ever since then, now they've won 6 in a row. Obviously, as we're recording this, they're going to play Louisville in a road game, no matter how that unfolds, unless they lose by 30, I guess. I still feel like this is a team that, all right, they shoot the ball so well. And, this is, to me, the kind of team, if you're identifying what, seed-wise and all that, the projections are kind of everywhere for them. But it's just not a team, I think, that I would like to see come March, just based on how they play. So I've really got my eye on them because they were someone that I kind of put in that mold of potential sleeper team coming into the season. And when you just kind of look at the way they have played to this point, again, no matter how maybe the result goes against Louisville, the schedule gets a little bit tougher for them down the stretch. They've still got some tough games, got to go to Virginia, but you also look at the home games against North Carolina and Duke. So I'm fascinated by the Wolfpack here down the stretch just to see exactly where they finish. And no doubt about it, if they're winding up in that 6-7 type seed range, 8-9, that's probably not a team I'm wanting to see if I'm one of those, 1, 2, 3 type seeds in that second round setting, just kind of knowing that, the way this team has really, I think, improved a great deal so far.
Yes, I am in agreement with you with this NC State team. They're actually number 1 in the country in terms of points per possession away from home. Yep. That was going into the game against Louisville, so we'll see if that holds up. But certainly I've been impressed by them, and really the entire ACC has been a lot of fun to take a look at. And Blake, I know you're doing a great job looking at the entire landscape of college basketball. You do such great work, obviously out there in the SEC, but on so many different fronts. So love the good people at home. Know it's all on tap for you, and how people can follow along on social media and other platforms.
Yeah, always appreciate it, Greg. Yeah, find all of our SEC stuff over at Southeastern 16, daily SEC basketball stuff over there. And yeah, everything else college basketball related, you can follow me on Twitter/X at the Blake Lovell.
And Blake does such an incredible job looking at this great game that we all know and love of college basketball. Every single time he joins me, he learns such great insights, and did so once again today. So big thanks to Blake for joining me on Coast to Coast Hoops, now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. And coming up next, it is that time of the podcast. I give you picks and analysis on every game on the betting board for this college basketball Tuesday as we hit some bank shots. And we're back here, lovely Las Vegas, for Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Hoops Peterson, now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. Always a pleasure to be joined by Blake Lovell, who does such great work over at Southeastern 16. Every single time he joins me, he lends such great insights, and he did so once again today. So a big thanks to Blake for joining me in the last segment. Now it is that time of the podcast. I give you picks and analysis on every game on the betting board for this college basketball Tuesday as we hit some bank shots.
Most financial establishments close at a certain time, but not here. It is time for a side and total on every game on today's betting board bank shots.
Do note that, as per usual, any changes that are made to these plays will be listed up on my Twitter/X feed at gunit_D1. We are going to be going in Las Vegas rotation order. Today, that is time order. We don't have any games on the extra games board or anything like that, so that keeps things very clean, very easy, and straightforward. How about if we get things started? 601, 602 on the card. UW Milwaukee is on the road against IU Indianapolis. IU Indy is between a 1.5 point favorite to a 1.5 point underdog, depending upon where you look. 162 to 162.5 is the total, and I made a total of a 166. I'm in on the over, mainly because with these two teams, last time they played, it was 95 to 83, I believe it was, and that was with UW Milwaukee dealing with all the injuries that they've got. Seth Hubbard, he's out for the season. We haven't seen Danilo Jovanovic, although Faison Fields, their top rebounders, and Jovanovic give you 12 points per game in about 4 weeks, so that was all factored in that game. Now, you do have an IU Indy team that has been good in terms of generating turnovers, 24th in the country in terms of turnovers generated on a per possession basis, but unfortunately for them, they are outside the top 340 in terms of both opponents' 2-point and 3-point shooting percentage, so they very much gamble for turnovers. They're not even a great 3-point shooting team. Kyler D'Agostino shoots 40% from 3, 18.5 points per game, but should find some holes against a UW Milwaukee defense that they themselves are about 320th in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. You've got a IU Indy team that really doesn't grab a lot of rebounds, as Jackson Edwards, Finley Woodyard, these are the lone two guys on the roster that give you over 3.6 rebounds per game. They do combine for about 22 points per game, but on the flip side, for UW Milwaukee, it is pretty bare bones with them, as you're right now dealing with so many injuries in terms of their top rebounders. So that means that Aaron Franklin, who gives you about 6.5 points, 6.5 rebounds per game, he needs to step up in a big way, and he's pretty much a lone healthy player that gives you over 5 boards per contest. You do have Amar Uyagard in the backcourt, give you about 13 points, and for Milwaukee, they are only shooting about 31.7% from 3. They've been pretty solid on the interior, though. This is still a top 125 team in terms of offensive rebound percentage. They're getting gash inside. side. They're right around about 300th in terms of opponents' 2-point shooting percentage as well. But even with all the injuries, this has been a UW Milwaukee team that has done a good job taking care of the ball. They're a top 85 team in terms of fewest turnovers on a per possession basis, and this figures to be, much like the first time around, a very up-tempo game just because that's the way that IU Indy plays. It's the UW Milwaukee team. They're more of a mid-tempo team. They're about 187th in terms of total possessions per game. IU Indy, Mambo number 9, but that said, I do think that UW Milwaukee, even with all the injuries, they do find a way to persevere, get the job done. I do think that late game fouling helps you go over. So, set by total 166, I like the over, and UW Milwaukee either as a 1 to 1.5 point favorite or on the money line as an underdog. 603, 604, Vanderbilt is on the road against Auburn. Auburn is a favorite of 3.5 to 4 points. 160.5 to 162 is the total. I made a total of a 163.5. I do like the over. You've got an Auburn team that has been a top 35 team in terms of points scored on a per possession basis. They're fast, but they're not necessarily warp speed fast. For Auburn, about 90th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. Vanderbilt is looking to run it 26th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. It is a Vanderbilt team that has seen a little bit of a fall off in terms of generating turnovers. It's still in games played away from home in terms of turnovers generated on a per possession basis. This is a top 45 team in the country, and I think that's going to be just enough to be able to keep them lively in this game. I did set my line at 1.5, so I still have Auburn as a favorite, mainly because this is an Auburn team that has been one of the best in the country in terms of grabbing second and third chances. Keshawn Hall is giving you 20-plus points, 8-plus boards, shooting 40+% from three-point, and then Keyshawn Murphy, he throws in there 6 to 7 rebounds per game. Auburn at home is able to grab 37% of their missed shots as an offensive rebound. Overall, they are 22nd in terms of offensive rebound percentage, and Vanderbilt, they've had Jalen Washington along Devin McLaughlin combined for about 12 rebounds per game, but still, they're only about 185th, and away from home, they're well outside the top 250. They only grab away from home 22.7% of their missed shots as an offensive rebound. Now, for the backcourt, Auburn is at a disadvantage because Taj Fedderford just has not been what we were hoping this year. He's shooting 26.5% from three, so it gives you 14 points, 3.5 assists per game for an Auburn team that, to their credit, they're a top 40 team in terms of fewest turnovers on a per possession basis, but a little bit disappointing there. It's an Auburn team that's amazing at getting to the free throw line, top 10 team in terms of free throw attempts on a per possession basis, but they're also getting waxed on defense. They're outside the top 2 is 65 in terms of opponents' 3-point shooting percentage, hovering right around about 200th in terms of opponents' 2-point shooting percentage, and the Tylers have really stepped up for this Vanderbilt team. Tyler Tanner and Tyler Nickel will be able to combine for about 33 points per game. Tanner throws in there 2.5 steals, shoots 38.5% from three-point range, and then with Mr. Duke Miles, he's able to give you about 2.8 steals, 16.5 points per contest. While Nickel is that top 3-point shooter, as he's been able to shoot about 45% from 3-point range, and then you do have the likes of an A.K. Okereke, who's able to give you 9 points per game. It is a Vanderbilt defense has been a little bit shaky on the inside. They're outside the top 125 with regards to opponents' 2-point shooting percentage. They themselves, though, have been a top 20 2-point shooting team. Vanderbilt doing a great job in terms of taking care of the ball as well, and they're good at the free throw line. They shoot 77.5% at the free throw line. It's a Vanderbilt team that is still a top 30 team in terms of points scored on a per possession basis, and that hasn't taken too much of a fall off when they're away from home. It has been a case where the defense has been. So I do think that this is going to be a high-scoring game. I do think that in the end, Auburn has just enough to be able to get it done, as this has been a Vanderbilt team that hasn't been quite the same since the Frankie Collins injury, but could only set my line at 1.5. So won't take 2+ here with Vanderbilt, and I'm going to be in on the over. Made that total 163.5, 6 of 5, 6 of 6. You've got Miami, and they're going to be playing us to North Carolina. UNC is laying a point to a point and a half total on this game, 158.5 to 159.5, and I did set my total 159.5, so 159 or less, I'm going to be willing to lay it in. I said Miami is a very slim favorite, so I'm going to take them on the money line. For North Carolina, you have to wonder if there's perhaps a little bit of a letdown after knocking off Duke on a buzzer beater at home, and it is a North Carolina team that still has been very suspect in close games because of their free throw shooting percentage. They do shoot just 68.5% at the free throw line. That ranks right around about 300th in all of college basketball. Now, Miami is not necessarily the most nails team at the free throw line themselves at 68.1%. They're actually worse than North Carolina, but for North Carolina, they've been strong on the interior, but now they face off against a Miami team that I feel like is able to match it. For North Carolina, they've been a top 10 team in terms of opponents' 2-point shooting percentage, their own 2-point shooting percentage, more around about 36th, and it's sort of the opposite for Miami. Miami is hovering in the neighborhood about 60th in opponents' 2-point shooting percentage, but they're a top 20 team with their own 2-point shooting percentage, and I do think that Miami has a little bit more around the perimeter. They're a country average team with their 3-point shooting percentage, with Sheldon Henderson, Trey Donaldson give you about 30.5 points per game, and Donaldson is is able to shoot about 35% from three-point range. Malik Renew, 20 points, 6.5 rebounds per game. And then Ernest Uday has been just a really good rim protector for this Miami team, only about 7 points per game, but 1.3 blocks, 9.5 rebounds per game. So he's been able to do just the little things to be able to help out this defense. And it is a Miami team that does very much get gashed from the outside. They've been outside the top 250 in terms of opponents' three-point shooting percentage. North Carolina, they're just outside the top 185 with this regard as well. And North Carolina is starting to find a little bit more three-point shooting. Seth Trimble, who hit that game winner against Duke, now shooting 37% for 3, 14 points per game. The top three-point shooter, though, is actually Henry Vassar, 46% three-point shooter, 16.5 points, 9 rebounds per game. And then Caleb Wilson doesn't necessarily shoot it well from three, but he's able to pop it from three, 20 points, a little bit over a block, steal and a half, 9.5 rebounds per game. You get really good versatility there, but I do feel like with what Miami have on the inside, and this has been a North Carolina team for as strong as they are on the glass, for as good as their big men are, they are allowing quite a few second and third chances, and this has been a bunch that has been able to do a really good job in Miami of being able to own that rebound battle. I think that could be a big X factor in this game, because outside of Vassar, along with what you've been able to get out of Caleb Wilson, it's been a little bit rough for them. Now, for North Carolina, they're about 26th in the country in terms of defensive rebound percentage. Miami is 15th, though, and Miami has been able to haul in there a few more second and third chances. I do think that in a game that's going to involve some atrocious free throw shooting, but a game that I think is going to be cranked up tempo, Miami is about 105th in terms of total possessions per game. North Carolina, well, they're only about 144th in terms of total possessions per game this season. They have been playing much faster here in ACC play, so I did set a total of 159.5. 159 or less, I like the over, and I'm taking Miami on the money line. 607, 608. BYU is going to be on the road against Baylor, and Baylor does find themselves as a home underdog here of 2.5 to 3.5 points. 116.5 to 161.5 is the total. Semi line at 4.5. I'm going to be willing to lay it with BYU. Things have just been a disaster for Baylor, and James Nanji, I don't think has scored in like 5 or 6 games. It's absolutely insane. So Baylor has a very thin rotation. They've been able to get a lot of production out of Cameron Carr. He's driven things with about 19.5 points, 6 boards, shoots 40% from 3. Obi Ejim has been able to step up in a big way. And I will say Isaac Williams is shooting 51.5% from 3-point range. I also do think that you're going to get a higher scoring game. I did set my total at 162.5. I like the over, mainly because the one thing that Baylor has done a really dominant job of grabbing second and third chances. They rebound 36% of their misses as an offensive rebound. That is 14th in the country, and we have seen this BYU team be pretty solid in terms of giving themselves second and third chances. They rank 53rd with this regard, and a BYU defense that to begin the season was really stout has hit the skids a little bit. They're down to about 61st in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, but I'm willing to lay it here with BYU, mainly because Baylor is far worse on defense, 179th in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, with AJ Debonsa give you 23 plus points, 6 plus boards. He's not necessarily the most amazing three-point shooter, but that's why you've got Robert Wright and Richie Saunders. These two guys have been both shooting combined above 41% from three-point range. Saunders is chipping in there 19 points, 6 boards, 17.5 points, 5 assists out of Robert Wright for a BYU team that has been able to do a good job on the inside as well. They're a top 50 team in terms of their two-point shooting percentage. Now you've got Tunde Yusufu on the flip side for Baylor, who's been able to give you a little bit of everything, 17 points, 6 boards, a trio of assists, so he does just a little bit of this and that, but also for this BYU team, the offense has been able to travel really well. Defense has not been able to travel so well, so that's been a little bit of an issue, but you take a look at this BYU team overall for the season, and right now they are checking in 23rd in the country in terms of points scored on a per possession basis in a road/neutral venue that stays within the top 40. I do think that this is going to be a little bit more of an up and down game, given that BYU is 72nd in terms of total possessions per game, have just really sped themselves up here in conference play, and Baylor plays at a rate of about 4.5 possessions per game more at home rather than away from home. Do think that with BYU having Kebakita down low, give you about 7.5 rebounds per game. That helps them out with Baylor being able to grab so many second and third chances, and it's enough for BYU to cover this number. So my line at 4.5, willing to lay it with BYU, and at a 162 or less, I'm in on the over. 609, 610. It's Virginia. They're going to be on the road against Florida State, and Florida State does find themselves as a 7.5 point home underdog. 150.5 to 152.5 is the total, and for Virginia, I did set this line at a 7, so I am willing to take 7.5 plus with Florida State. It's a Florida State team that's going to be looking to uncork it from 3-point range. They're a top 25 team in the country country in terms of percent of their shots that come from three. They're not particularly a good three-point shooting team, as right now for Florida State, they rank about 291st with their three-point shooting percentage. Does go up to 32.3% at home compared to about 30.8% away from home. Meanwhile, you've got a Virginia team that has been a quite solid three-point shooting team at 35.7%. It is a case where Florida State is gambling for turnovers. They're a top 35 team in terms of turnovers generated on a per possession basis. And for Virginia, I'd say they've done a solid job in terms of taking care of the ball. 87th in the country, and Virginia is certainly going to have an advantage on the glass. For Virginia, top 10 team in terms of percentage of their missed shots that result in an offensive rebound. You've got Thaddeus DeRitter doing an amazing job, giving you about 16.5 points, 6.5 boards, shoots in the mid-30s from three. Sam Lewis is now shooting 40% from three. He and Malik Thomas both throwing their 4 boards. Jonah Grunlow, Ogana Onyesu, they combine for about 4.7 blocks per game, but it is a Virginia team that is not afraid to put you on the free throw line. They are a top 100 team in terms of free throw attempts allowed on a per possession basis, and Virginia is not necessarily a team that's going to put you under duress. They're well outside the top 225 in terms of turnovers generated on a per possession basis. Meanwhile, for Florida State, you've got Robert McRae, who's been able to give you 14 points, 6 assists. He only shoots about 31.5% for three. As a matter of fact, you look at this Florida State team, man, out of their top 6 scorers, nobody shoots above 36.1% for three. Martin Silverville shoots approximately 36.1% from three, but they do have a really nice collective of guys that have just been able to chip in. They're very weak down low. This Florida State team is outside the top 250 in terms of opponents' 2-point shooting percentage, but I mean, they've been a very solid team in terms of grabbing second and third chances. They're not quite on the same level as this Virginia team, but still, Florida State, in terms of percentage of their missed shots that result in an offensive rebound, they've been a top 115 team there. And for Florida State, with them being so good in terms of generating turnovers, I think that it's going to be just enough for them to remain lively in this one. I did set a total of a 155. I think they get a very up and down game. This Florida State team is 20th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. Obviously, Virginia playing at a little bit of slower tempo at 235th, but I think that you get enough made threes to be able to get you the over. So, semi-line at 7. We'll take 7.5 plus here with Florida State, and I'm in on this total over as well. 6-11, 6-12 on the card. It is George Mason. They are going to be on the road against Richmond. The Itsy Bitsy Spiders are a home underdog of 4.5 to 5 points. 139.5 to 148.5 is the total for George Mason. I did set them as a 4.5 point favorite. I'm going to be willing to take 5 plus here with Richmond. It's a Richmond team that has been one of the better 3-point shooting teams in all of college basketball. Not a team that's necessarily going to do an amazing job in terms of giving themselves second and third chances at home. They're hovering right around about 300th in terms of offensive rebound percentage, but 20th in the country in 3-point shooting percentage, hovering right around about 37.9%. And it's a George Mason team that they themselves have been a solid 3-point shooting team away from home. They shoot 35.3% from three, and interestingly, with Richmond, they actually shoot far better from 3-point range away from home rather than at home. Richmond shooting 35.4% from three at home, 41.5% away from home. But George Mason, a top 85 team with regards to their 3-point shooting percentage away from home. And George Mason is doing a nice job taking care of the ball. In games played away from home, only 13.4% of their possessions become a turnover. That is a top 15 mark in the country. Now, it's not a Richmond team that is necessarily a heat-seeking missile to start with in terms of generating turnovers. It's just more of a whole is greater than the sum of its parts approach with them, as AJ Lopez is right now give you 12.5 points per game. And then outside of Lopez, you've got essentially 8 different guys between 4.7 and 10.5 points per contest. You've been able to have Jaden Daughtry shoot 45% from three, 9.5 points per contest. Michael Walls has been the top rebounder of 7 rebounds per game, and Jonathan Beagle's the only real other guy that gives you over 3.5 rebounds per game and 4.7 boards per contest. But still, for this Richmond team, they've been able to do an okay job holding up on the glass. They are weak with regards to their interior defense. They are outside the top 240 in terms of opponents' 2-point shooting percentage. And on the flip side, you've got a George Mason team that has been strong in the backcourt, as you've got Corey Mincy, Jahari Long, who've been able to combine for about 28 points per game, with Mincy shooting 42% for three. Long has been able to shoot 37% for three. They combine for 7 assists per game. They've done a nice job in tandem. And for this George Mason team, you've had Riley Allenpatch step up with about 6 rebounds per game. Emmanuel Kinga is able to give you about 5 boards per contest. They're really the lone two guys. They give you over 3.8 rebounds per game. George Mason is not pulling in there a lot of second and third chances, but they're also not allowing you to be able to grab second and third chances as well. George Mason well outside the top 200 with regards to offensive rebound percentage, but they're a top 100 team in terms of defensive rebound percentage. George Mason really looking to slow things down. They are 337th in terms of total possessions per game. Richmond, it's been more of a mid-tempo team at 202nd, but I do think that Richmond is going to be able to remain lively with their overall shooting, and it's a Richmond team that if they need to bury free throws, they shoot 75.5% of the free throw line. George Mason, more of a country average team, right around about 72.9%. So semi-line at a 4.5, we'll take 5 plus here with Richmond, and semi-total at a 140.5, so 140 or less, I'm going to be in on this total over 613, 614. George Washington, our nation's first president, plays us for Rhode Island. Rhode Island is a underdog here of 4.5 to 5 points on all scheme. It is 149.5, and I made a total of a 145.5. I'm I'm in on the under, mainly because I do think that turnovers are going to be very costly to this, and you've got a Rhode Island team that's looking to play very, very slowly. I recognize that George Washington is a bit more of an up-tempo team. George Washington, 97th in terms of total possessions per game. Meanwhile, you've got a Rhode Island bunch that, as of right now, they are checking in 308th in all of college basketball, but that said, this is a Rhode Island group that has been really good at being able to just put teams under duress, 15th in the country in terms of turnovers generated on a per possession basis, but on the flip side, you've got a George Washington team that has been solid in terms of generating turnovers. I'm not going to call it amazing or anything like that, but in terms of turnovers generated on a per possession basis in their home games, they're a top 65 team there, and for George Washington, they should be able to exploit a Rhode Island perimeter, just offense and defense has not been great. For Rhode Island, 295th with their three-point shooting percentage on offense. On defense, they are ranking 303rd, and this is a George Washington team that has been a quite good three-point shooting team after Lovell Garrett Johnson has been able to bring to the table with about 4.5 boards, 14 plus points per contest, and then you've been able to have your top scorer in Rafael Castro do a tremendous job down low of 16 points. He also gives you 2 steals, block and a half per contest, 9 rebounds per game. Trey Autry shoots 40% for 3. Overall, George Washington has been a top 85 team with regards to their three-point shooting percentage, or a top 55 team with their two-point shooting percentage, and George Washington should also be able to do a nice job in terms of being able to dominate the boards. George Washington has been allowing a few second and third chances, about 125th in the country in terms of defensive rebound percentage, but you've also got a Rhode Island team that they themselves are about 150th with this regard. Meanwhile, in terms of being able to grab those second and third chances, George Washington has been one of the better teams in all of college basketball. They are clocking in about 33rd in terms of percentage of their missed shots that result in an offensive rebound, and on the flip side for Rhode Island, you've got a pair of guys that have done a nice job as double-figure scorers in Jonah Hinton along with Tyler Cochran, combining for about 28.5 points per game, and Hinton has been able to shoot in the mid-30s from 3. Jamari Tripp shoots 41% from the outside, but for Rhode Island, while outside the top 125 with regards to their offensive rebound percentage, they've been pretty efficient on the inside, top 100 team with their two-point shooting percentage, with George Washington as well outside the top 200 with that regard, but with Rhode Island being as sloppy as they are with the ball, about 300th in the country in terms of turnovers on a per possession basis, I think that costs you an over and allows George Washington to run this game. I set my line at 9.5, willing to lay it with our nation's first president, and I'm going to be in on the under as well. 6:15, 6:16. You've got Notre Dame, and they're going to be playing on the road against SMU. SMU is a 11.5 to a 12.5 point favorite. 153.5 to 154.5 is the total. Won't take the points with Notre Dame. I set them as a 9.5 point underdog. This is a Notre Dame team that has actually been able to do the little things very well. For Notre Dame, in terms of defensive rebound percentage, they have been a top 5 team in the country here for much of the season. That has gone down to number 8, but still, they're allowing teams to only grab about 22.3% of their missed shots as an offensive rebound. Meanwhile, SMU, they are 171st, and at home that goes well outside the top 225, even with Sabat Yidglu at 7'2", being able to give you about 6.5 rebounds per game. And for this SMU team, they've been a very exceptional three-point shooting team. You've got Kevin Miller has been able to give you 19.7 assists. I refuse to call him Boopy, but he boops teams with shooting 39% from three-point range. BJ Edwards shoots 37% for 3, 13.5 points, 5 assists, 6 rebounds, 2.5 steals. Stat sheet suffer right there. Corey Washington shoots 42.5% from three-point range, but his Notre Dame team, where you want to cash them, is on the inside, because the Notre Dame defense has actually been able to do quite a good job in terms of closing out from the outside. They allow opponents in a roadside-neutral venue to shoot about 31.5% from three-point range. That is a top 55 mark in all of college basketball, and they've got a nice designated rebounder, Carson Tout, that's been able to allow them to run the glass. 6.5 points, 9.5 rebounds per game. Jalen Harrelson has had to step up since the Marcus Burton injury as the top scorer, 15 points, 2.5 assists. And then you do have Brendan Shrewsbury along Cole Kurta, who will be able to combine to shoot about 38% from three-point range between the two of them. 22.5 points per contest. Sir Muhammad has been able to throw in there about 5.5 points per game as well. So I do think that for this Notre Dame team, they're going to be able to do enough to remain lively. They're going to need to take a little bit of better care of the ball. As they've been losing the turnover battle. Notre Dame is well outside the top 335 in terms of turnovers generated on a per possession basis. They're outside the top 175 in terms of their ball security. And for SMU, they've been a country average team in terms of taking care of the ball. Top 150 team in terms of generating turnovers, but they are allowing a lot of open looks from three-point range. For this SMU team, they're also outside the top 200 with regards to opponents' two-point shooting percentage. I think that that's enough for Notre Dame to remain lively, and what should be an interesting tempo war for Notre Dame, 262nd in terms of total possessions per game. SMU looking to gun it, and 28th. I think that Notre Dame holds in there. Semi-line at 9.5. I'm going to be willing to take the points with Notre Dame, and maybe a total of 155.5. I think that this might be just close enough for late game fouling, and Notre Dame find some cracks in this SMU defense. So on the over and the points with Notre Dame, 6:17, 6:18. Fordham is going to be on the road against St. Joe's. St. Joseph's to not be average. Joe's has 4.5 to 5.5 point favorites. 131.5 to 130.5 is the total. And for Fordham, I did set them as a underdog of 5.5 points. So 4.5 to 5 is my max lay with St. Joe's, but I'm going to be willing to lay it. This is a Fordham team that's exceptional on glass. Top 25 team with regards to their overall rebound percentage, not allowing a ton of second and third chances. But for the St. Joseph's group, they've been able to do a solid job themselves in terms of being able to haul in there some second and third chances. They are giving up quite a few opportunities on the defensive glass. They're about 219th in the country in terms of defensive rebound percentage, but they're also a top 35 team in terms of shot block percentage. If you look at the overall points allowed on a per possession basis, St. Joe's and Fordham are relative equals. For St. Joe's, they're ranking 95th in the country with this regard. Right now for Fordham, they have fallen to just about 68th in the country, but they are giving up about 8.2 points more per 100 possessions away from home rather than at home. And the big problem for Fordham has been the offense. They've been outside the top 250 in terms of points scored on a per possession basis. Really, both of these teams are awful with their three-point shooting. St. Joe's is shooting less than 30% from three. Fordham is shooting less than 30% from three-point range. I will say that for Fordham, they might have the best overall scorer in this game. That'd be DeShore Reeves, about 17 points, 4 assists, 4 boards, but he's only shooting 28.5% from three-point range. As a matter of fact, you take a look at this Fordham team right now, and out of your top 3 scorers, you don't have anyone shooting above 28.5% from three, though. Christian Henry, 5.3 assists per game, and for Fordham, they've been a little bit outside of country average in terms of taking care of the ball. They've been making up for it by being a top 40 team in terms of their offensive rebound percentage, but they do give it up a little bit from the outside. They're a country average team with regards to opponents' three-point shooting percentage, and at the free throw line, Fordham is only shooting 69.9%. That's hovering right around about 250th. Meanwhile, for St. Joe's, if you can get them to the free throw line, they're actually pretty good there at 75.5%. You've had Jaden Glover step up in a big way with about 16 points, shoots 37% from three. And even though overall for the season, the St. Joe's team is a bottom 35 team with their three-point shooting percentage, they've ascended here in conference play to shooting more around about 33.5% from the outside. Not amazing, but it's better. They've been a top 5 team in specifically A10 play with their 2-point shooting percentage on offense, and on defense, they've actually been able to do a really good job being number 2 there as well, so they're not allowing a lot of good looks inside. They've been overall for the season a top 45 team with regards to opponents' 2-point shooting percentage. They do a nice job in terms of keeping teams off the free throw line as well. Now, St. Joe's sloppy with the ball. They're about 250th in the country in terms of turnovers on a per possession basis, but Justice Ajabor, 5 points, 5 boards, but he throws in there about 2.5 blocks per contest. This year, Haskins has been able to shoot about 35.5% from three. Throws in there 11.5 points, 6 rebounds per game. I think that Fordham is going to be able to hold up on defense, but I do think that the St. Joe's team is starting to find it a little bit more on offense. I certainly don't think that this is going to be like a rambunctious game with regards to scoring, as St. Joe's is about 180th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. Fordham more around 353rd, but I think that you're close enough for late game felling, and I do like the way that St. Joe's has been operating much better on offense here recently. So I did set a total of 137.5. I like the over, and for St. Joe's, I'm going to be willing to lay up to 5 with them. 619, 620. Purdue is on the road against Nebraska. Nebraska finds themselves as a slim 1.5 to 2 point favorite. 146.5 to 147.5 is the total, and I think Purdue robs the bank. I've got Purdue as a 2.5 point favorite. I like them on the money line. The way that you need to knock off this Nebraska team is with 3-point shooting. Nebraska is a top 20 team in the country in terms of percentage of their own shots that come from 3-point range. They're top 20 team in the country in terms of percentage of opponents' field goal attempts that come from 3. And guess what Purdue does? They shoot 39.7% from 3-point range away from home. That is a top 15 mark in all of college basketball. You've got Fletcher Lawyer, who's been able to do a really good job in terms of stepping up, shooting 40% from 3 to be able to allow Braden Smith to be able to operate and roam free for Smith. He has been doing an amazing job giving the team 15 points, 8.5 assists, 1.8 steals per game. It's a Nebraska team that really doesn't generate a ton of turnovers, put you under duress. Really, neither of these teams are going to as well, so you're going to get probably a slowed down game, but a lot of clean possessions. Right now for Purdue, 313th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. Nebraska is more around about 251st, but for this Purdue team, they've been able to step up a little bit more defensively. They've been fragile on the inside. They're outside the top 175 with regards to opponents' 2-point shooting percentage, but they've actually done a nice job in terms of guarding the 3-point line. Nebraska at home is allowing opponents to shoot just 28.3% from 3-point range. Purdue is not quite that, but Purdue, in terms of overall opponents' 3-point shooting percentage, that is 83rd in the country, but in games played away from home, teams are shooting just 30.4% from 3 against them. That's actually a top 35 mark in the country, and then you throw in there down low what you've been able to get out of Oscar Clough, 10.5 points, 7 rebounds per game, Terry Kaufman-Renn, 3 assists, 8.5 boards, 12.5 points per game, and I think that that's going to be able to win out here. Even though you got Rick Mass on the flip side for Nebraska, who's been incredible. 14.5 points, 6 boards, 3 assists. He's able to shoot in the mid-30s from 3. You got Braden Frager back after he dealt with injury, as he and Jamarcus Lawrence combined for about 23 points, combined to shoot about 30% from 3-point range, and each of your top 4 scorers for Nebraska do shoot over 80% at the free throw line, but this Nebraska team is also outside the top 275 with regards to offensive rebound percentage. Now, when they take twos, Nebraska has hit them. They've been a top 25 team with that regard as well, but this is a Nebraska team that I think is going to have a little bit of a tough time dealing with all those guys on the inside for this Purdue team, and I do think that Purdue finds a way to be able to get the job done. This game shouldn't involve a lot of free throws. Nebraska's one of the worst teams that get to the free throw line. They don't allow you to get to the free throw line, but this is a Purdue squad that they're also very disciplined. They don't foul a ton, so I think that you get a slow down game, but a very efficient game that Purdue is able to pull out. I said my total 146.5, 147 plus in on the under. I like Purdue here on the money line. 621, 622. Marquette is going to be on the road against Villanova, and Villanova is a 9.5 to a 10.5 point favorite. 145.5 is the total line. I did said Villanova is an 11.5 point favorite. I'm going to be willing to lay the number. Now, Villanova has not been a great free throw shooting team, but Villanova has been really a good team in terms of both their offensive and defensive efficiency, and they shoot 39% from 3-point range at home. That is definitely a top 50 mark in all of college basketball. Villanova overall is about 55th in the country in terms of points scored on a per possession basis, but if you look specifically in their home games, that ascends into the top 45, and Villanova's really not allowing a lot of good looks on the inside. They're 80th in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, and this Marquette defense, they very much gamble for turnovers. They've been a top 60 team in terms of turnovers generated on a per possession basis, but they've also been very weak on the inside. They're outside the top 200 with regards to opponents' 2-point shooting percentage. They leave themselves very vulnerable from 3-point range. Marquette right now allowing teams to shoot 37% from 3-point range in a road/Rich Core venue, and Marquette, they themselves have not been a great 3-point shooting team. Had a nice outburst over the weekend against Baylor, but even with that, they're still shooting just 32.1% from 3. That's outside the top 260 in all of college basketball. Nigel James has stepped up, being able to shoot 39.5% from 3, 15.5 points per game, but he is pretty much the lone out of their top 4 scorers that shoots about 30% from 3. Chase Ross does give you 2.5 steals, 3.5 assists, 15 points per game, and then you do have Ben Gold, who's been able to give you 5.5 rebounds per game, but Duke Brandon on the flip side for Villanova should be able to dominate things down low, 12.5 points, 10.5 rebounds per game, and then Tyler Perkins, along with Bryce Lindsey, are both to give you 13 points per game. They combine to shoot about 36% from 3 now. Lindsey has had quite a bit of a fall off here in conference play, and conference play is actually averaging fewer than 10 points per game, but Devin Askew now shooting 43% from 3-point range. You've got a Villanova team that has been pretty good with regards to not allowing great looks on the inside. They are allowing a little bit more on the outside. At home, teams are shooting well above 35% from 3-point range against them, but again, you've got a Marquette team that's not popping it well from 3-point range. Marquette has been able to give themselves a few second and third chances, but I do think that they're going to be a bit ravaged on the glass for Marquette in terms of defensive rebound percentage. 303rd, they're allowing teams to grab 31.7% of their misses as a offensive rebound, and I think the Villanova wins from within. Did set my total at a 145.5. Was seeing a 144.5 earlier at a 145 or less and on the over, and I'm going to be willing to lay up to 11 with Villanova. 623, 624. You've got Wisconsin on the road against Illinois. Illinois is at 11.5 point favor. 154.5 to 155.5 is the total line. So my line at 10.5. So 11 plus, I'm going to be willing to take the points with Wisconsin. Wisconsin has done a very nice job in terms of doing the little things. They don't allow you to be able to grab second and third chances, as they only allow opponents to grab about 24.1% of their missed shots as an offensive rebound. That's 21st in the country, and they do square off against an Illinois team that is a top 10 team in the country with regards to overall rebound percentage, so that's going to need to hold up. But for Wisconsin, they're a relatively good team in terms of taking care of the ball. Now, that doesn't matter as much against Illinois. Illinois is about a 10 team in the country in terms of generating turnovers. They're just looking to not give you clean looks, but this is also a Wisconsin team that does a great job in terms of knocking down their free throws. Wisconsin, 12th in the country, shooting about 78.1% of the free throw line. Again, though, Illinois, they shoot 79.1% of the free throw line, and Illinois, top 3 team in the country in terms of fewest free throw attempts allowed on a per possession basis, so it's going to be a war of doing the little things well. I do think that Illinois is going to be able to pull it out, but I do think that the number has just gone a little bit too far, even with having so many big men down low. You've got the Vicic brothers, both give you about 10 points, 5 rebounds per game. W. Barosic has been able to give you 12.5 points, 8 boards, and then Keaton Wagler. He's been one of the best finds in all of college basketball. 18 points, 4 assists, shoots 43% from 3-point range after. To start the season, it's not like he was doing a ton in conference play. He's averaging over 20 points per contest. He's had to step up quite a bit with Kylan Boswell being out due to injury, and he has done so in a very big way. But I do think that with having Nick Boyd along with John Blackwell in the backcourt, that is going to be able to keep Wisconsin in this game. These two guys are combining for about 38.5 points per game. It's a hit or miss Wisconsin team from 3-point range, and they are a top 40 team in terms of percentage of their shots that do come from 3-point range. But Blackwell's been able to shoot about 36.5% for 3. Braden Carrington, he shoots 39% from the outside. You've had Nolan Winter be able to give you about 9 boards, double-figure amount of points. Austin Rapp has been dealing with a little bit of an injury, probably going to be out of the fold once again in this game. But with the way that Wisconsin is doing those little things well, even though they have been a team that's been a bit fragile on the inside, they're outside the top 175 with regards to opponents' 2-point shooting percentage. They square off against an Illinois team that has been very disciplined with regards to their 2-point shooting percentage, top 40 team with regards to their own 2-point shooting percentage, top 40 team in terms of opponents' 2-point shooting percentage. But I think that Wisconsin can find just enough cracks to be able to knock down a few threes. Illinois a little bit more fragile with their 3-point shooting defense rather than their 2-point shooting defense, as teams against Illinois right now, they're shooting about 31.3% from 3-point range. I think that that's just enough for Wisconsin to remain lively in a game where there's going to be a lot of clean possessions, maybe not a ton of possessions, as Illinois has really slowed down 307th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. I did make my total here a 154.5, so seeing 155 plus in on the under and the points with Wisconsin. 625, 626. Eastern Illinois is going to be on the road against Western Illinois. Western Illinois home underdogs of 4 to 4.5 points. 131 after 133.5 is the total. I set my total 127.5. I'm in on the under. You've got two teams that are quite literally in the bottom 15 in terms of points scored on a per possession basis. Eastern Illinois 356th in terms of points per possession. Western Illinois 353rd, and neither team is pushing tempo. Both of these teams outside the top 270 in terms of total possessions per game. Now, Western Illinois has also been a wreck on defense. This Western Illinois team in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, well outside the top 275, 330th in terms of opponents' 3-point shooting percentage, but it's not like Eastern Illinois is doing a great job of popping it and locking it from 3-point range either, and Eastern Illinois games just involve a ton of turnovers. They're sloppy with the ball. It is Eastern Illinois 340th in terms of turnovers on a per possession basis away from them, 23rd in terms of generating turnovers on a per possession basis away from them as well, and that's a big reason why I did set Eastern Illinois as a 5.5 point favorite. I'm going to be willing to lay it with them, mainly because you've got a Western Illinois team that's outside the top 325 in terms of both their 2-point and 3-point shooting percentage. Even when they get to the free throw line, they only shoot 68% there, and you've got a pair of guys, Isaiah Griffin, Lucas Lorenzen, who've been able to combine for about 26.5 points per game, and Griffin does shoot about 34% from 3-point range, but you just don't have a ton down low with this team either. You've got Kerry Dixon, who's been able to give you 8.5 points, 7.2 rebounds per game. Right now, he is the lone guy on the roster that gives you over 4.2 rebounds per game, and he's most likely going to be out of this game due to injury. And for Eastern Illinois, they dealt with a few injuries to begin the season. Andre 3000 Washington, the transfer that comes over from Long Island, since he's gotten healthy, he's been able to give you 10.5 points per game. Now, this is an Eastern Illinois team that's not going to give you a ton down low. You've only got two guys in Terry McMorris and Cooper Jacoby that give you over 4 rebounds per game. They combine for about 11 boards per contest, but the turnovers, I think, are going to greatly help out this team. They don't allow good looks from 3. Eastern Illinois has been a top 55 team in terms of opponents' 3-point shooting percentage now. Again, doing absolutely nothing on the inside, but I do think that for Eastern Illinois, the fact that they're a respectable team at the free throw line, they do shoot about 74% at the free throw line. This is a Western Illinois team that they are not shy to foul in terms of free throw attempts allowed on a per possession basis. They do find themselves well outside the top 235 in all of college basketball. That's enough for Eastern Illinois to win a game that I think is going to be an almighty slog and see some very sad offense. I set my line at 5.5, so willing to lay with Eastern Illinois, and I'm going to be in on the under, so my total 127.5. 627, 628. Duke is on the road against Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh is a sizable underdog here of 16.5 points. So on this game between 136.5 to 137.5. And I do like the over. I set my total 138.5. I think that Duke is going to continue to just do a nice job down low. They're a top 5 team with regards to their own 2-point shooting percentage. And for Duke, this has been a team that has been a pedestrian 3-point shooting team, but still you've got a Pittsburgh team that has been outside the top 175 in terms of opponents' 2-point shooting percentage, and Pittsburgh at home allows teams to shoot 37.5% from 3. That said, I do think that this Pittsburgh team is going to be able to hold in there. They have been 67th in the country in terms of percentage of their missed shots that result in an offensive rebound. Now, Duke is also a top 25 team with that regard, but you do have a guy in Cam Corrin who's able to give you 12.5 points, 7.5 rebounds per game. Barry Dunning is getting your Dunning, 11.5 points, 5.5 rebounds. DeMarco Minor has been major with 9.5 points, 3.5 assists, And for Pittsburgh, a much better three-point shooting team at home rather than away from home. Away from home, they only shoot about 30.3% from the outside compared to about 35% at home. Now, Pittsburgh also awful at the free throw line. They are shooting 66.7% at the free throw line. That is a bottom 30 mark in all of college basketball, but for this Duke team, they have been a little bit suspect with regards to that perimeter play. You know exactly what you're going to be able to get out of Cameron Boozer. 23.5 points, 10 boards. He has been absolutely magnificent. And then Patrick Ngongba has been able to give you 10.5 points, 6 rebounds per contest. Isaiah Evans, so shoots in the mid-30s from 3. He's been able to give you a block, 3 rebounds, 14 points per game, but you're still looking for a little bit more with regards to that perimeter play right now for Duke. And it's a Duke team that's pedestrian at the free throw line as well. They shoot 71.8% at the free throw line. It is a Duke team that is still a top 15 team in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, but it's a Duke team that's playing a little bit faster than they have the last few years. They're about 225th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. Pittsburgh playing very, very slowly at 338th, but I think that Duke is just efficient enough on offense to be able to get you the over. And I do think that those second chances for Pittsburgh help them remain lively. So it's about line of 12.5. I'm going to take the points with Pittsburgh, and I'm going to be in on the over. So my total 138.5. 629, 630 on the card. It is Arizona State. They're going to be playing us to Oklahoma State. Cowboys, who find themselves as a 2 to 2.5 point underdog. 163 to 164 is the total. I said my total 169. I'm in on the over. Oklahoma State is looking to play at warp speed, 8th in the country in terms of total possessions per game, and Arizona State, they're not shy to run as well. 71st in the country in terms of total possessions per game, but I do like this Oklahoma State team on the money line because you take a look at Arizona State, and they've got some of the most shocking home and road splits that you're going to find in all of college basketball on offense. Arizona State is right now ranking 51st in the country in terms of points per possession away from home, 261st at home. I don't understand why, but they're averaging about 4.5 points per 100 possessions fewer at home rather than away from home. Now, you have to love what Mo Odom brings to the table. 17 points, 6 assists, shoots 37.5% from 3. Anthony Johnson shoots 36% from the outside, about 13.5 points per game out of him, but they don't have a ton down low. Santiago Triop, along with Masamba Diop, both of these guys have been able to combine for 11 rebounds per game. Lone two guys on the roster, though, they give you over 3.6 rebounds per game, and Oklahoma State, they should be able to win that battle. It's an Oklahoma State team that has been a top 175 team with regards to rebound percentage. Not amazing, but good enough to be able to get the job done here, as you've had Anthony Roy just take over games, 17.5 points, shooting 44% from 3-point. Victorious Miller is a 40% 3-point shooter with 13 points, and then you've got Parsa Fala, give you 6 boards, 13.5 points per contest. Christian Coleman throws in there 4.5 rebounds per game. He doesn't give you a ton of scoring, but Isaiah Coleman, 7 points, 4 boards. He's been able to do a relatively solid job there. It's an Oklahoma State team that in a pressure spot, they shoot about 73.5% the free throw line. Neither here nor there. They're an okay shooting team, not necessarily an amazing shooting team. Oklahoma State does have a few warts on defense as well, but Arizona State, I would say, has bigger warts. As for Arizona State, in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, it has been all sorts of brutal for them, especially on the inside, as right now they are checking in 249th in the country with this regard. Oklahoma State obviously having some issues as well. They're about 146, so I do think that you're going to get plenty of points up on the board. So my total 169. I like the over, but for Oklahoma State, I just think that they execute better on offense. I like them on the money line, 631, 632. Houston is going to be on the road against Utah. Utah finds themselves as a sizable home underdog here of 16.5 points, 142.5 to 143.5 is the total, and for Utah, I set them as an underdog of 13.5 points. I'm going to be one think the points. Now, this Houston defense has been very dominant. They are 6th in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. That does take quite a bit of a drop off away from home, though. They are giving up about 20.8 points more per 100 possessions in a road/neutral court setting rather than at home. Now, Houston, when they get to the free throw line, they shoot 78% at the free throw line. And even though it's a Houston team that hasn't been the world's greatest shooting team, going into the weekend against BYU, hovering right around about 135th in terms of both their 2-point and 3-point shooting percentages. I mean, not bad, but not necessarily amazing. Still, though, a top 55 team in terms of points per possession because they do the little things well. They commit the fewest turnovers per game of any team in all of college basketball, and his team grabs a bunch of second and third chances. Top 25 team in terms of percentage of their missed shots that result in an offensive rebound, but they give opponents second and third chances. They're about 150th with regards to offensive rebound percentage for opponents, as they allow opponents to grab about 28% of their misses as an offensive rebound. Now you've got Kingston Flemings, Emmanuel Sharp, who live up to their name and combined 33 points. They shoot 36.5% from 3. And Milo Zuzan, after a really rough start to the season with regards to his 3-point shooting, in the 10 Big 12 games that they played, he's been able to shoot 42% from 3-point. Chris Senek, Joseph Tugler, they've been able to combine for about 13 or so rebounds per game, so that helps them out greatly, but On the other end of things, I do think that Utah is going to be able to get a lot out of Terrence Hot Rod Brown, who's been incredible with 21 points, 4 assists. He's shooting 35% from 3 overall for the season. In conference play, that goes up to 44% from 3. In conference play, it's a Utah team that has been able to shoot about 36% from 3, matches their season-long total, so that hasn't taken a drop-off just because they've gotten into conference play. Now, you've only got 2 guys on the roster that give you over 3.5 rebounds per game. James Okonkwo, 6 rebounds, 2.5 points per game, and then Keno Dawes has been able to give you 9 rebounds per game. In Utah, dreadful on defense. They're 99th in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. They don't force the issue. They are well outside the top 325 in terms of turnovers generated on a per possession basis. And Houston's a slow team. Houston, 327th in terms of total possessions per game. Utah's not afraid to run, though. In terms of total possessions per game, 103rd. But I do think that you're going to get some offensive execution in this game. I do think that you're going to get some points. And with Utah shooting the way that they are from 3-point range, I know that Houston has been a solid 3-point shooting defense. I think it's enough for them to remain lively, especially with Don McHenry now shooting 40% for 3 with his 18 points per game. So semi total 147.5. I like the over, and I'm going to take the points with Utah, set them as a 13.5 point dog. 633, 634. Arkansas is going to be on the road against LSU, and LSU does find themselves as a 5.5 to a 6.0 underdog. 161.5 to 162 is the total line. I set my line at 6.5. I'm going to be willing to lay up to 6 with Arkansas. It's an Arkansas unit that has been a little bit fragile in terms of their defense, but they've been able to do a good job in terms of guarding the perimeter. Where you can really get these guys is on the inside in terms of opponents' 2-point shooting percentage. They have been all sorts of dreadful there at about 243rd. And for this LSU group, they've been a team that they themselves have been pretty solid on the inside. They're 40th in terms of opponents' 2-point shooting percentage. Where you can get this LSU team is from 3-point range, and that's a big reason why LSU was unable to pull out the game the first time around, because Arkansas had so much 3-point shooting, and LSU at home, they're allowing teams to shoot 36.7% from 3-point range as well, outside the top 290 in all of college basketball, and that's a big reason why I'm going to be willing to lay with Arkansas. You've got an Arkansas team that's a top 20 team, turns points scored on a per possession basis, with Darius Acuff, Malik Thomas leading the way. Acuff about 6.5 assists, 20.5 points, shoots 41.5% from 3. Malik Thomas shoots 39% from 3 with 15 points, 3.5 rebounds per game. It's not an amazing Arkansas rebounding team, but Trevon Brazil has good versatility, 13.7 rebounds per game. And for Carter Knox, he's done a nice job being able to shoot about 39% from 3-point range as well. And for Arkansas, they have been a group that has been able to guard the 3-point line. And LSU, even though they've been as efficient as they have been on offense, they're honestly not the most impressive 3-point shooting team. You do have De'Don Thomas, who's been doling it out really well, giving you about 6.5 assists, 15.5 points per contest. I have to like what he brings to the table. He's been in and out of the lineup, but I think that there's an outside chance that he plays in this game. Personally, I have him out, but that said, even if he does play, he's probably not going to be 100%. That was part of the handicap here as well. But even if you don't have De'Don Thomas out there, you still have been able to have quite a bit of good, shall we say, efficiency with this team. They have been a top 125 team in terms of taking care of the ball, and it's been all about getting the ball on the inside. They've been a top 50 team with regards to their own 2-point shooting percentage, as Max McKinnon has been a very versatile guy, 15 points, 2.5 assists, assumes a lot of the ball handling duties whenever Thomas is out. Pablo Tamba has been able to give you about 7.5 points, 7.5 boards. He throws in there a steal per contest as well, and actually shoots 37.5% from 3. McKinnon does shoot 40% from 3-point range, but mostly these are guys that are looking to be able to pile drive the ball inside. As a matter of fact, for this LSU team, if you look at their overall 3-point shooting when they've been at home this far this season, that's only about 34.8% from the outside. So they should be able to have some success on the inside against this Arkansas team. But with them dealing with all the injuries that they are, and this is being an LSU team that has been less than tremendous on defense, and this being an LSU team that's a mid-tempo team, 171st in terms of total possessions per game, Arkansas is going to be looking to fly and really look to make this game scrambled. 43rd in terms of total possessions per game. I do think that Arkansas is going to be able to speed it up. Think that you might be close enough for late game following. So semi-total at a 162.5, at a 162 or less in on the over, and I'm willing to lay up to 6 here with Arkansas. 635, 636. Iowa State is on the road against TCU. TCU is a home underdog of 6.5 points. 148.5 is the total line. I did semi-total 143.5. I'm in on the under. Now, Iowa State has really been able to ascend with their offense. They are 8th in the country in terms of points scored on a per possession basis, 4th with regards to their 3-point shooting percentage, but this is still a team that's built on defense. They're still a top 8 team in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, top 6 team in terms of turnovers generated on a per possession basis, and I know that TCU has fallen on some tough times with regards to their defense, but still overall for the season, 48th in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, 49th in terms of turnovers generated on a per possession basis. But for TCU on offense, they just lack a lot of pizzazz. They're right around about 149th in terms of points per possession. You do have David Punch, who's been able to give you 14.5 points. He's been solid down low with about 7 rebounds per game, and then Xavier Edmonds has good versatility, 41.5% three-point shooter, 12.5 points, 6 boards. Jane Pierre shoots 38% from three, but even though TCU does a relatively good job in terms of taking care of the ball, just not a great shooting team. They're outside the top 145 in terms of their 2-point and 3-point shooting percentage. They've been okay on the glass, but not necessarily amazing there. Where they really shine is being able to just generate those turnovers, and now you're facing off against an Iowa State team that's been very sure-handed in the backcourt, to use a little bit of a pun, as you've got Timon Lipsby, who's been able to give you 5.5 assists, 13.5 points per contest, throws in their 2.5 steals per contest. Iowa State is a top 100 team in terms of fewest turnovers on a per possession basis. Now TCU, interestingly, they've been looking to play up-tempo, and Iowa State is more mid-tempo. Iowa State 189th in terms of total possessions per game, TCU 89th in terms of total possessions per game, but Milan Mimosavljevic has been just absolutely tremendous. 18.5 points, shoots 53% from 3-point. Joshua Jefferson, 17 points, 7.5 boards, 5 assists, steal and a half. Good versatility, shooting 40% from three. Jamarian Bateman has stepped up to be able to shoot 39.5% from 3-point range. You add that with being able to generate those turnovers, and it's an Iowa State team that's still solid with regards to their percentages as well. They're a top 100 team in terms of opponents' 2-point and 3-point shooting percentage. They do not allow you to get to the free throw line. They're actually a top 10 team in terms of fewest free throw attempts allowed on a per possession basis. I do think that that's going to win out, even though TCU has been quite a pesky team at home this far this season. Did set my line at 8.5. I'm going to be willing to lay up to 8 with Iowa State, and on the under, I set my total at 143.5, 637, 638. Fresno State is going to be on the road against Utah State. Utah State does find themselves as a favorite here of 19.5 points. 149 to 150.5 is the total. Set a total of 151.5. I do like the over. You got a Fresno State team that is fast, but not necessarily gunning at 132nd in terms of total possessions per game. Utah State has stunningly been a mid-tempo team at 187th in terms of total possessions per game, but this is a Utah State group that they only shoot about 32.5% from 3-point range at home. It's very ordinary, but they've still been one of the most efficient offenses in all of college basketball. They are 25th in the country in terms of points scored on a per possession basis, and they play right into the hands of being able to have a high-scoring game, because if you look at what this Fresno State team does well, they guard the 3-point line. They've been a top 45 team in terms of opponents' 3-point shooting percentage. Fresno State, if you look at them in a roadside-shoot score venue, they actually have been a top 35 team in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, but they do such a great job guarding the 3-point line that they forget to be able to guard things on the inside. Fresno State is about 320th in the country in terms of opponents' 2-point shooting percentage. It's stunningly been much better away from home rather than at home, but I could only set my line at 18.5. I recognize that Utah State is a top 10 team in terms of turnovers generated on a per possession basis, and Fresno State is sloppy with about 316th in terms of turnovers on a per possession basis. Fresno State is actually committing fewer turnovers per possession when they're away from home rather than at home, and it does feel like Fresno State is starting to find a little bit more from the outside as well, because they were dealing with an injury to David Douglas to begin the season. He shoots 39% from 3, 7.5 points per contest, and then you've got a big three, Jake Highbreder, Zayon Collins, and Deshaun Gorey. Gorey and Collins both give you a combined 24.5 points per contest. Neither shoots the ball from 3. Highbreder shoots 89% of the free throw line, 32.5% from 3-point range, and for Fresno State, the key for them is being able to get the ball inside. They've been a country average team with their 2-point shooting percentage outside the top 250 with their 3-point shooting percentage, and then you've got a Utah State team that has been able to have MJ Collins just absolutely dominate games, 18.5 points, shoots nearly 40% from 3, but Mason Fosloff really goes under the radar. 3 assists, 2 steals, 16.5 points. He shoots 41% from 3. Kobe King has been able to shoot 44% from 3-point range as well. And for Utah State, top 15 team in the country with regards to their 2-point shooting percentage, so I do think that they do their part with this total, but it is a Utah State team that is going to allow for some second and third chances. Now, Fresno State has been well outside the top 275 in terms of their offensive rebound percentage, but I do think that they get a few more second chances here than they normally do. Utah State is only about 198th in terms of their defensive rebound percentage overall. That goes outside the top 225 at home. I think that that's just enough for Fresno State to remain lively in a game where I think that Utah State gets a bunch of points inside. So, set my line at a 151.5. I like the over, and I'm willing to take 19 plus here with Fresno State. 639, 640 on the card. Colorado State is on the road facing off against the Air Force Falcons, aka the Washington Generals. As for the old Air Force Generals, aka the Falcons, they're 14.5 to 15.5 point underdogs. So this game between 134 to 134.5. Did set a total of 132.5. I'm in on the under mainly because I just don't think that Air Force does their part with this total. It's an Air Force team that is so stinking slow in terms of total possessions brain. They're 298th, and they're 362nd in terms of points scored on a per possession basis. They have their coach Joe Scott on indefinite suspension, and ever since he has been suspended, he's been suspended for 6 games. They've lost by 15 plus in every single one of them. Like, this team is getting blasted in every capacity possible. They're also outside the top 325 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. They're outside the top 320 with regards to their own 2-point shooting percentage and opponent's 3-point shooting percentage. They actually shoot it relatively okay on the inside, but they're a bottom 10 team in terms of offensive rebounds per game. They pull in their 7 offensive rebounds per game. They've got a 7-footer in Wesley Jalkowski, who's allergic to rebounds at 2.3 rebounds per game. Like, what are we doing here? Caleb Walker, their top scorers right now, deal with an injury. Cam Sanders, Lucas Hoblin, they combine for about 21.5 points per game, but man, it is all sorts of rough for this team, and Colorado State has fallen off a little bit with their offense. They're down to about 57th in terms of points scored on a per possession basis. But hey, last time they really had an outburst, it was against Air Force. They won that game 81-52, and you've got a bunch that's still 11th in the country with their 3-point shooting percentage. And as a matter of fact, for Colorado State, each of your top 4 scorers, Kerry Booth, Kyle Jorgensen, Brandon Redsteiner, Josh Passarelli, they all give between 10.1 and 12.4 points per contest, and they all shoot at least 39.7% per 3-point range. You've got Booth giving you about 6 rebounds per game. Jorgensen is able to throw in their pair of assists, 4.5 rebounds per game. It is a Colorado State team that has a tough time taking care of the ball. They're outside the top 220 in terms of turnovers on a per possession basis, and Colorado State is actually even slower than this Air Force team. If you look at them in terms of total possessions per game, 364th out of 365 teams, but they're very efficient. They don't really force you into turnovers either. They're outside the top 300 in terms of turnovers generated on a per possession basis. That said, I think that they go out there and they just stomp the yard on an Air Force team that they are a skid mark on the underpants of college basketball right now. I'm in on the under. I said by total of 132.5, and I'm going to be willing to lay it here with Colorado State to make them a favorite of 18.5 points. 641, 642. Old San Jose State is going to be on the road against UNLV, and UNLV does find themselves as a sizable favorite here of 12.5 points. 153.5 is the total line. I'm going to be willing to take the points with San Jose State. I did set my line at a 9 for UNLV. They're going to be looking to speed this game up. 42nd in the country in terms of total possessions per game. San Jose State more around about 333rd, and for San Jose State, it has been a very gross year for them, especially down low. They're outside the top 335 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, and they're outside the top 325 in terms of opponent's 2-point shooting percentage. They're 45th in terms of defensive rebound percentage as well. It's a UNLV team that doesn't do the world's greatest job in terms of grabbing second and third chances, and they themselves are 182nd in terms of defensive rebound percentage as well. UNLV has been pretty solid in terms of generating turnovers, top 85 team in terms of turnovers generated on a per possession basis, but it's also a UNLV team that has been very suspect in terms of their offense as well. In terms of points scored on a per possession basis, they do find themselves well outside the top 175 in all of college basketball here, and as a matter of fact, on defense, they're also about to run 46th in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. Trey Gibbs, Lawhorn, Kamani Hamilton have been your main 2 guys for UNLV, with Lawhorn shooting 37% for 3, 18.5 points per game. Hamilton, 11.5 points, 4.5 boards. He's been able to give you some nice versatility with a pair of assists, a steal per contest as well. And then Tyron Jones, pair of blocks per game. So he's been able to do a relatively solid job with that regard, but it is a unit that really gives it up from 3-point. They're outside the top 255 with both their own 3-point shooting percentage and opponent's 3-point shooting percentage, and that's one thing that San Jose State has going for them. They've been able to shoot about 35% from 3, and for San Jose State, just a whole bunch of injuries. Their top 6 scorers, 5 of them have missed at least 4 games this far this season, but they will have their top scorer, Kobe Garland, available in this game. Shoots 35% from 3, 18.5 points per game. Now, they have absolutely nothing down low. The Afant Mundi right now deal with an injury, 7.5 boards per contest. That leaves nobody on the roster. That gives you over 4.1 rebounds per game. That'd be Melvin Bell, who's been able to give you about a steal, 4 rebounds per game, so he's been able to do a relatively okay job. And then Adrian Myers, who missed much of the season, he shoots 35% from 3. He's going to be able to give you a little bit of pop there, and it has been a San Jose State team that has been okay in terms of generating turnovers. I'm not going to call them amazing or anything like that, but if you look at them in terms of turnovers generated on a per possession basis, this is a unit that finds themselves in the top 175 in all of college basketball, so I do think that that's going to help keep the scoring down a little bit more, and I do think that San Jose State going to be able to slow this game down. It's a UNLV team that's been quite suspect on the glass and with regards to their own outside shooting. So I think that you've got 2 bad teams, and I think that it results in a little bit of a sloppier game that San Jose State holds in there on. I set my line at a 9, so we'll take the points with San Jose State, and I like the under. I set my total at 149, and wrap things up with 643, 644. Gonzaga is going to be playing us Washington State. Washington State, an underdog of 19.5 to 20.5 points, 156.5 to 157.5 is the total line. I set a total here of a 159.5, so I'm going to be in on this over. You got a Washington State team that has has just not done a great job in terms of taking care of the ball outside the top 10 with regards to turnovers on a per possession basis on offense. Not a team that's going to put you under duress either. 321st in terms of turnovers generated on a per possession basis. And for Gonzaga, even with the, shall we say, shortfall that we saw against Portland, they've still been really dominant at home. Overall for the season, they've been 21st in the country in terms of turnovers generated on a per possession basis, so they should be able to take it to Washington State there. And for Gonzaga, this is still a top 30 team in terms of points scored on a per possession basis. And if you look solely at home games, Gonzaga leads the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, but it's still a Gonzaga team that as well is a top 50 team in terms of total possessions per game, and that's a big reason why I am going to be in on this total over, as you've got Graham Ike back, and Graham Ike, he has been absolutely masterful with 30 plus points in 2 out of the 3 games since he's come back. Had 35 points in that game against Oregon State, just carried them, shooting 37% from 3-point range, and then we've been able to get good production out of Mario Hussein-Sapri, who's been able to shoot 45% for 3, 8.5 points per game. Davis Fogel is starting to get trusted with more minutes, and rightfully so, because he's been able to do a great job there. It's a Gonzaga team that overall is just a hair outside the top 100 with regards to their own 3-point shooting percentage, and name of the game for Washington State is being able to knock down their threes. Break glass in case of emergency for Ace Glass, who's been able to supply 16.5 points. He shoots from 3-point range about 39% from 3. Rehard Varbers, Emmanuel Yeho, they've been able to combine for about 21.5 points per contest. Both shoot above 41% from 3-point range. Overall, Washington State shoots 37.5% for 3. That's a top 40 mark in all of college basketball. They've also been a top 100 team with their own 2-point shooting percentage, just absolutely giving it up on defense, though, for Washington State in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. They're a nice hearty 271st in all of college basketball. Actually give up a few points fewer per 100 possessions away from home rather than at home. You've got Ende Okafor, who's able to give you 5.5 rebounds per game, and even with Braden Enough being out of the fold, I do think that the likes of Jalen Worley and company going to be able to do enough for Gonzaga to dominate this game, and I think that they would put up a big number against a Washington State team that's not been efficient on defense. So set my line at 21.5. I'm willing to lay up to 21 with Gonzaga, and I'm going to be in on the over, set my total at 159.5, and that wraps things up for the Tuesday edition of Coast to Coast Hoops, now part of the VSiN family of podcasts. Big thanks to Blake Lovell, who does such great work over at Southeastern 16. He joined me in the last segment. And if you do like hearing from this fine podcast, Coast to Coast Hoops, you're able to subscribe wherever your podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Spotify, Stitcher, and TuneIn. If you have a question, comment, segment idea, what have you for this podcast, you do have one of 2 ways to fire those in. First one is my Twitter/X timeline at gunit_81. Keep in mind, letters CM, they mean does not matter, so per usual, please do send these into the timeline. And the other way is find an Apple Podcast review. If you rate this podcast 5 stars, it's very much appreciated. From there, you're able to fire in whatever you'd like to hear on this podcast via that 5-star review, and I'm with you guys every single day on this podcast, give you picks and analysis on every game every day, so I'll be back with you once again tomorrow. Thank you.